Another hang with me video, hang with me number 2. Glad you could come over today. Today I'm going to be working on Brenda Gervais' Autumn's Fruitful Labor, which is this chart here. I think I have it for sale in my shop. I think I've got some stock on it, but I'm trying to get it done in time to take to the show. And I have finished quite a bit of it. Last night I finished that row of birds and sunflowers, and then I got to start on the words. And so that's what I'm going to be working on while I talk to you today. Hope you have a good project to work on, or you're catching up on your ironing. This one has been a pretty fun project to work on. It's the colors are so pretty, and I think Brenda is such a popular designer, and I think she has such a great eye for color that it's just fun. It's fun to gather the threads together and get them put down on the fabric and see how they turn out. And it's always interesting to see how threads lay down on a piece of fabric. This I had to go into another project to get this thread. It's Schneckly by Weeks Dye Works, and I had it in with a project that I started during Stitch Mania called what was it? It was a Stacey Nash reproduction that she put out at market, and so she was using Schneckly for the vine border, and so I've always considered Schneckly to be kind of a gold brown, but when she put it with some of these other colors, it almost had a green cast to it, and it does have some green in it. But now I'm stitching this here, and it looks golden brown again. So it's just funny how you can have kind of the same idea, the same color, but it looks different depending on the application that you're using it for. It's part of the reason why I like to stitch a lot of other designers' pieces, because you learn a lot about color and design and things just by seeing how other people put things together. Weeks Dye Works has been around for a while. I remember, this would have been like the 90s. We had just moved back to Fargo, so it was like 97 or something. And it might have been just before I opened my shop. I don't remember, but it was in that area. And I had heard of sampler threads. Sampler threads to me were newish. But then I had a pattern by Fancy That, and I want to say it was maybe like a Halloween pattern of some sort, and it called for Weeks Dye Works charcoal, I want to say. I'm pretty sure it was charcoal. And so I went to the Nordic Needle, which was our local needlework store at the time, and I said, "Hey, do you carry this Weeks Dye Works thread? It's calling for this color." And they said, "No, we've never heard of that." I mean, that's how new it was. And of course, eventually they carried all the Weeks Dye Works. And so I don't remember what I ended up doing for that. Probably just subbing out. I think I ended up giving it away as a gift to a friend. But it's hard to believe so much time has gone by that I can still remember what it was like to go into a shop in Winona, Minnesota. Not Winona. So we lived in Winona, Minnesota for 2 years, which is down there by Red Wing and Rochester, and it's on the border with Wisconsin. And La Crosse, Wisconsin was just across the border amongst the bluffs. It's a pretty little town if you ever get a chance, especially this time of year. Very, very pretty. And there was a shop there, and still is, called the Cross Stitchery. When I was going there, Judy was the name of the owner, and she had a partner named Marcia who helped her run the store. And they were just really funny and smart ladies. And I would do stitching get-togethers with them. I would drive. It seemed like a long way at the time, but it was like a 35-minute drive to get there, which really isn't that far. And it was beautiful, beautiful drive. But I remember going into her shop and just being so inspired. It's part of why I ever opened a shop, because I was like, wow, this is exactly awesome. Because it was just in this old building with brick walls and in cool downtown area. Everything was displayed really, kind of like we would decorate now, primitive and, cool baskets and things like that. And I remember seeing Lizzie Cates there. Lizzie Kate was a new designer at that time. And Judy had a small wall of the sampler threads. And I was blown away. I was like, what? Because I had only ever stitched with DMC. And so I just thought it was so neat that these threads were hand dyed and that they, changed color within the skein. That was like a mind blower. But it hasn't been that, it's been a long time. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's been a long time since those threads were new. But then again, it seems like it was just yesterday. I don't know where I was going with that story. I guess I love over-dyed threads. And this is Weeks Dye Works. And I like Weeks Dye Works. People often will complain about different threads. Like, I don't like sampler threads because the batches are inconsistent. And I don't like Weeks Dye Works because I feel like the threads are thinner. And some people say, well, they're salty. And salt is often used in the dyeing process to help things take the dye. But I don't know. I see those differences as positive. You can look at them in a positive way. I love that sampler threads vary from batch to batch. I think it's fun to just see color changes, even if it's kind of drastic. And over the years, colors have changed quite a bit because dyes change, and so then they have to kind of try to reformulate their recipe. And it's hard to dye something exactly the same twice if you're, it's kind of if it's kind of a hand-made product. So to me, that variety of what the threads look like every time you get them in is fun. I know it can be frustrating if you're working on a piece and you don't have a matching dye lot. But I think it's fun to use 2 different dye lots and it just ends up looking kind of more primitive and neat. Hi, Ruby. Yeah. And then Weeks Dye Works, it can feel a little bit thinner than some other threads. The colors are very consistent though, and the variegation is just always so consistent. And I have never really had trouble with Weeks Dye Works matching from batch to batch. So sometimes, it's fun for things to change, and then it's also nice when you can count on a thread for being consistent. It's definitely not worth getting worked up over. DMC, I know they say that has changed over time. And I don't know how old your DMC is. I have DMC that goes back a ways. I have DMC that goes back to, when I was young, when I was, just learning to stitch, because some of those colors you just hardly ever use. And when I was 22-ish, we were young and poor, and we had a baby, and we were in grad school, and we didn't have a lot of money. And I had DMC, and I had the idea to make my own thread cards out of this stiff paper that I bought on clearance at some store. It was, like a card stock, and it was pink and flecky. And so I actually one afternoon made a whole bunch of homemade floss bobbins out of this cardstock by just tracing around them and then cutting them out with the scissors. And how expensive are thread cards, but to me I was being frugal. And I still have some of those original thread cards in my where it still has the thread on them that I wound around them then, and I've used some of it but not all of it. And so it's fun when I'm working on a project and I pull one out and I'm like, oh, this is one of my oldies. And sometimes DMC back then could seem so smooth. And it's not that it's not nice now. I think it just is different. I don't have I'm going to leave it. I don't have any problem with DMC at all. It's a good product, and it's inexpensive. Somebody was saying that she heard that DMC could go up to $1 a skein. And I know it's hard to... You go, oh my gosh, it's so expensive. Because, at this point, we can all say, back in my day, DMC cost a nickel. But the cheapest I ever found DMC, I think, was 6 cents a skein. And it was at a Kmart that was going out of business. And it's kind of sad to me now. Not sad. It's just kind of ironic now that I remember going, and the colors that were left at 6 cents a skein were like exactly the colors that I like now. So like the muddy, mucky, I was like looking for, do they have red? Do they have, blue? And the ones they had left were like, the 730 range and, 829 and some of those kind of goldeny brown colors that I would have said, ooh, it looks like, baby puke or whatever. That's what they had left at 6 cents. And that's pretty cheap. 6 cents, it doesn't get much cheaper than that. It's tricky for shops to stock DMC. Sometimes people get a little shocked when they get sticker shock because they go to a needlework store and they're like, oh my gosh, DMC floss was 61 cents a skein. That's a standard markup for a shop. Typically in a needlework store, the markup of something is double. So if you buy something for $5, a shop will sell it for $10, and that's just kind of the standard markup. It's not that there's really fixed prices, it's just that's the idea. So if you go to a store and it's like, oh, DMC was 68 cents a skein, well, that means that store had to pay 38 cents a skein. And it's really hard to make a shop run if you're trying to match prices with the big chain, big box chain stores, because I have to imagine that a place like Hobby Lobby or Michael's, they're buying DMC floss by the boatload, like by the literal boatload. And so really, I stocked DMC for a while, and then I thought, oh, I'll have it as a convenience for my customers. But I sold it so rarely because people were like, oh, I'll just go to Michael's and get it because it's cheaper. And so really, I would just be selling skeins sometimes. Somebody would go, oh, you know what, I need 311, and so I'll pick up a 311. So you're selling one skein, but it takes up a lot of wall space and a lot of display space. So I eventually just I just didn't carry it anymore. I don't remember how I cleared it out, but and then I carried Anchor for a while, and I love Anchor floss. And that didn't do necessarily very well either, which is too bad because it's really a good product. Turns. I'm making the word turns. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But when you think about it, it's what a cheap use of your time. Like, think about a skein of floss, which is whatever, 8 yards or whatever. And then strand that out, so like right now I'm stitching with 1 ply, and that's 6 ply. So that's, 48 yards of thread is what you're getting. And how it takes me, I think about, on average, I would say 15 minutes to stitch in 1 length. So 15 minutes and 45 yards, that's a lot of time that you can spend doing something you love for 60 cents. And even the overdyes that are $2, $2.50, it's still a lot of enjoyment for the amount of money. If you think you go to a movie, how much does it cost to go to a movie these days? It's really expensive for 2 hours. So it would cost you like 20 cents for 2 hours to stitch with DMC or whatever. People are funny about their, what they stitch with sometimes, where they feel like they have to make apologies, like, oh, I only use DMC, or oh, I don't use silk because it's so expensive. But I think you should just work with what you like, what works in your budget. Like, none of it matters. None of it matters. And no one should ever be embarrassed for, like, oh, I only stitch, this kind of piece, or I only work on this kind of fabric. We're all doing the same hobby. Steve and I were in the car yesterday or the day before. We went out and ran some errands. And I said, remember that game Gnip Gnop? Do you remember that game Gnip Gnop? And he goes, yeah. And then I go, oh my gosh, I just realized that gnip ganop is ping pong backwards. And he was like, yeah. And I'm like, I'm 48 years old and I just now realized that gnip ganop is ping pong backwards. I guess I just wasn't really paying attention. Turns. I definitely have mistakes in this piece. And I'm always okay. I'm okay with it. I guess it's probably one of the reasons I really like stitching primitive pieces or, you know, kind of sampler style pieces, is mistakes are really okay. And you don't ever see it. You don't ever see it really, unless it's like a major malfunction. You don't look at a piece and see like, oh, I was off by one thread here. You don't see that usually. I mean, you might know it's there, so it might bother you, and so you take it out. But it doesn't bother me if things are off a little. I usually just try to compensate somewhere else to make it all work. But when you look at an old sampler, if you look at it closely, there are tons of mistakes. Those poor little girls made so many mistakes. And the samplers are still beautiful. And I think it's one of those things where you see, you don't see the mistakes, but the mistakes make them like more real. They make it seem like, I don't know, like it just has a personality and you can't really necessarily put your finger on it. Well, I'm trying not to, there we go. I'm liking this new light that I got. I needed one. It's funny how, you know, sometimes you have a piece of equipment or it's like some clothing, you know, something in your life that you use all the time that you just put up with it not working. I had my, did I do this right? Yes. I had this Ott light for years. I mean, it had started to change color. That's how long I had had it. And it never was great. I think I just kind of got a lemon. And I contacted Ott Light at one point, and they kind of, you know, they were just like, well, you know, they didn't offer me any real advice or anything. And so I had to like hold my bulb in all the time with a rubber band wrapped around the base of it because otherwise they would just sometimes fall out and break. And those bulbs were $25 a piece. So that's an expensive bulb breakage. And then the base broke, and like I said, it was getting all yellowed. And I had put up with it and put up with it and put up with it. And one day, you know how sometimes you're just, you finally like really look at something. And you're like, why? This is bad. This looks terrible. Why have I not replaced this? And this was not an expensive light. It's a Veralux. I got it on Amazon. So it had free shipping, and it was like $59. And I like that you can I can make it like a warmer light or ooh, I should do that. That's probably better for you guys. A warmer light or a cooler light, and then I can make it brighter and dimmer. And I just think it's really cool. And the bulb is enclosed, and I like it. So. And I don't necessarily have anything against Ott lights. I have one of their desktop lights that I take to retreats. And that one is pretty good. I think I would like it better at this point if I had a tabletop light that I could travel with where it was taller and I could have it raised up a little bit. The desktop one that I have just is, I don't know, you know, like 12 inches tall or whatever, and then I can fold it up and out of itself. And so I have to kind of be right up against the table to use it. The older you get, the more you need these lights and things. I'm so loving my readers. One, two, three, four, five, six, seven. I started needing readers. It seemed like all of a sudden I went and worked at the shelter, and this was like 5 years ago, and I was 43 at the time. And I hadn't stitched. I mean, I literally had not stitched for a long time. Since I had started that job, really, because I was working like, 50 to 60 hours a week and then coming home and just, collapsing in an exhausted pile. And when I tried to pick my stitching back up, my eyes had just gone, where I couldn't see to stitch anymore just with my naked eye, even on 32 count. And I remember being part of the guild. I was a younger guild member. I think I joined my first embroiderers guild when I was like 20 something. And people were like, "Oh my gosh, you can see that?" But I was young and my eyes worked, and I said, "Oh, wait till you turn 40." And sure enough, at 43, that's when I started needing to use readers. And now I can't see up close to clip my fingernails even. Hi, Fitz. All the cats come running when I sit down to stitch. It's nice, really. Very restful. Unless one of them has got its foot on your head. But Fitz is nice. Fitz had a pretty good day yesterday. We've been having trouble with him, with Briar. She's one of our other cats, and I don't know that you guys have ever seen Briar. She's a little bit more kind of to herself. She's beautiful. I'll put a picture. I don't know if I have a picture of Briar. But the problem was Fitz was small a year ago, and then he just started getting really big, and he's our biggest cat now. So the other cats respect his largeness, I think is what it is. And he doesn't really know what to do with that. Like, he's very sweet, but if he's had a few scuffles, and so they're afraid of him because he's big. And he gets kind of like, he'll squeak and stuff because he doesn't know what to do. Like, they'll be growling at him, and he doesn't know what to do, and it's been kind of hard. So I went online and read an article by the ASPCA, what to do if you've got a cat that's kind of wanting to fight with another cat. And they said you really, like squirting water, they said works, that you squirt water at them and then just walk away. And they said you really shouldn't say like, "Oh, well, they'll work it out." So I think eventually it will get better. We're just trying to manage it. And when he and she, if I hear her growling, I'll go in and kind of just deflect, kind of direct his attention somewhere else. I'm going to bump this. Oop, nice. Bump this up a notchola. I have a ton to do in the next week because I'm getting ready for this show. But it's fun to get ready, and I have to make myself take a break, because it's like, last night I was like, okay, I'm going to quit working at 10, and then I was like, you know what, I'm just going to iron these 8 pieces of fabric or whatever. I did a couple things, and then it really was 11 by the time I finished. But it's the pressure's on. Right now I'm a one-woman operation, but things have been busy enough that I'm going to be looking to get some help. My son Graham has said that he could quit. He has a job at Raising Cane's right now, and he's looking at going back to school. But he said that he would be willing to work with me, which would be great. And so I may end up having to hire him to help me. I think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to pack orders, because I can train him to pack orders, and he's very, very sweet. But my time is better spent dyeing fabric, designing pieces, stitching models, making videos, working on the zine. Some of the stuff that I do is just, like ironing fabric. I could definitely train him how I like the fabric to be ironed. And it would just help a lot to have help. And he's going to go to the show with me, and he's never gone to one before. Harrison has gone, I think, twice. I want to say twice. And he had a great time. And I think it's nice for kids to see, what you do for a living. To see that, that it's hard work, and that it's interesting, and that you have this whole other world. Your work world is another world. That you don't, you come home after work and you see your family and you make dinner or whatever. And you just maybe spent 8 hours with this whole other group of people that your family doesn't even know. And it's like your other world. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. How am I doing this? 2. Oh, did I? Oh yeah, no, I did this right. So, you know, it is one of the things, like when I've worked by myself, sometimes I missed the camaraderie of working with other people. But there are always trade-offs with jobs. Sometimes other people aren't that much fun. Sometimes other people make your day a pain in the butt. So right now I'm in the middle of, like, you know, I have a list of things I need to get done, and I'm crossing things off the list for the show. But I'm always thinking of things to add to the list too. And the house is a mess because I've got boxes everywhere and I'm getting things organized. We pick up the, I rented a U-Haul cargo van, which I've done before. And I'm glad I did, because I'm going to have so much bulk of things to take that there's really no way. I could not have fitted in my Rogue. And I wouldn't have wanted to anyway. My car has got like 140,000 miles on it. But it's nice to put mileage on somebody else's car, because it's going to be, you know, like probably a 1,400 mile altogether trip. So it'll be nice to do that on somebody else's. Where am I? Labor. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's not as much fun to drive a cargo van. They're usually, the seats aren't super comfy, and it's like kind of noisier, but they just have all that space that I'm going to need. And that way I don't have to feel constricted as far as how much I can take. I can take everything. So, you know, there are so many things to consider with a show like this, and I think people don't really realize, you know, you go to a show and it looks fun, but everything that's there had to be planned. And so I have to think about things like, okay, I'm taking all these models, so you make a list of all the models you want to take. And I don't know how many I'm taking, probably 50 different pieces. And so you have to make the list of those and make sure that all of those get in your boxes and get packed away. The ones that are framed, obviously, you have to kind of be real careful with those. And then you have to make sure that you've ordered enough of the charts for people to buy. And it's always kind of a guessing game as far as like how many you're going to sell. And so how many do you order? And then sometimes, you know, like I got shipments this last week from Yarn Tree and Hoffman, and there were a few of the charts that I wanted to be able to take, and they're on back order. So then I either have to try to order them again this week or just scrap the idea of taking that model. Because I don't want people to see that I've brought a model and then just say, oh, well, I don't have this chart here, because that's disappointing. So you have to order the charts, you have to price the charts, and then you have to think about how am I going to display all these charts. When I used to go to the consumer shows, I would rent a U-Haul, and then I would take my spinner racks even. But I don't have my spinner racks anymore. So I had to get some new baskets and boxes and things, and I rented an extra table, and I'm going to turn the couch in the room into a table. I emailed Alma at Blackbird Designs, because they've done it in the past. And she said they just used a door, and they just set the door up on top of the couch, and then they draped, you know, a quilt over it or something like that, and it ended up looking really cute, and it creates another space for you to display things. Some people like it if you leave the couch open, because then they can sit down, but there are other chairs in the room. Usually there's you know, like kind of a chair like this, and then there are usually 3 other chairs. There's a desk in the back room. It's in a hotel room in Embassy Suites. There's a desk back there with a chair, and then there are 2 chairs at just like a desk in the front space. And so there are really 4 other chairs that people could sit in. You don't necessarily want people parking it and staying forever because, you know, there are going to be so many people at the show that we're going to be tight for space anyway. But I just really needed the display space because all of this merchandise is going to take up a lot of room. And I've had a few people ask already, like, oh my gosh, are you going to take pictures? And make sure you take pictures so we can see. I'll take a lot of pictures, and I will take video too, and then I can post that when I get back. So you guys can kind of feel like you were at the show. I'm hoping that I can get out to see the other booths because it's always fun to see what everybody else brought. But it's also going to be kind of banana pancakes to get out because I think it's going to be really a busy show. And Graham has never done a show before, and Graham is very sweet. He's very quiet, and for sure the first day or two, there's no way I would be able to leave him alone just because it's going to be too crazy, and he's going to have like a learning curve at the start because there's no way really for me. We'll talk about it obviously on the drive, what to do, and he's very enthusiastic about it. But it's kind of, what do they call it? Baptism by fire, where it's just like, all right, here's a needlework show. Here's all these crazy needlework ladies. Let's go. But he's very, very sweet. And it'll be nice for us to spend time together. Jennifer would have loved to have gone, but she can't get out of class to go, so she's got to teach. That's okay. Maybe next year she can go. But it isn't anything that I could do by myself. Well, I shouldn't say that. I could do it by myself, but I would have to make adjustments. I'm kind of thinking they have a 3-hour like pre-show, what do they call it? Like a sneak peek on the night before the show, the actual show, where it's like from 6 to 9. The shop's all open and for a sneak peek, and I guess that's kind of like early bird shopping. And it's fun, but early bird shopping is always crazy because everybody wants to, you know, see what you got. Everybody wants to cram in the booth. Everybody wants to make sure that they don't miss out on the things, you know, that maybe you don't have that many of, or the really, you know, the special things that you brought. And so it's a fun 3 hours. It goes super fast and it's really crazy. And so I think it's going to be interesting to see what Graham thinks about it. We're going to have to drink lots of coffee, I bet. I'm kind of thinking about taking my Nespresso machine along so that I can have good coffee every day pretty easily without having to run to Starbucks or something. It's expensive. Coffee out can be very expensive, and I really just need a little bit. But everybody's booth has its own personality, and you know, I like and know a lot of the people who are going, which is fun. Lindy and her crew from the Silver Needle will be there, and I really like Lindy and Mona. I don't know who else is coming, if Mary's coming or not. I'm sure Mona will come. But Nikki from Nikki's Creations is coming, and she's very, very sweet. She's very, very sweet. And I know Needleworkers Delight will be there, and I haven't met them yet. But I have started to carry the Silk Weaver fabrics. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I lost my count. There we go. I haven't met them yet, but they seem very, very nice. I'm carrying the Silk Weaver fabrics because they're really pretty. I used to carry them at my shop, but they're hard to get. And I don't know why that is. It could just be demand, or I'm not sure. But I got in some French vanilla swirl like a week and a half ago, and I got a huge box of it. It's already gone. I think I have a little 28 count left, and that's it. So I'm going to have to up my order for what I get from them because it was just high in demand. I placed an order where it's just like, okay, here are a bunch of colors I like. When you're able, get me together one batch with this many yards of each of these counts, and that'll be great. And I'll just stock it when I've got it, because my website will let me put stuff up, and then it keeps track of how much I've got. And once I run out, it won't let me sell anymore, which is nice. I know that a lot of people this year, you know, especially like this summer, we're real upset about Etsy because they've changed. Are you stuck on my pants? They've changed the way they're doing their, not their billing, but like they changed their percentage of how much money they want, and then I guess they were gonna charge sellers also a percentage of the shipping they collected, which is crazy. And I think enough people complained that they kind of backed off on that. It just doesn't make any sense to penalize the seller for, you know, for whatever they're charging for shipping. I don't feel like Etsy sellers really, you know, take advantage of shipping and try to make money there too. I think they try to do it as cheaply as possible, and a lot of times you'll get a refund for any overage that you spent. But so there was talk, you know, where a lot of shops were considering leaving, and it's Etsy is a great marketplace. I don't know how else you would find a lot of these unique sellers. You just come across really cool things. But it sure is a lot easier to build a website these days than it used to be. I had a job when we moved to Winona, Minnesota. I had a job at a newspaper, and my degree is actually in journalism. I have 2 degrees in journalism. And I got a job at a newspaper, and we were at the forefront of website development. So we created a news website for the newspaper, and I actually got paid pretty well. And I don't think it exists anymore. You know, news is a really tough business to be in because you are totally reliant on your advertisers. When you buy a newspaper, you're not paying the amount of money that it took that newspaper to put that together. It's more expensive to make a newspaper than it is to buy it. So they have to make up the difference with advertising. And so if the advertising isn't there, you're not able to put out your product. And I feel like advertising has gotten so tricky. Sometimes people will say, well, you know, like I'm a new designer or I've got a new shop. What do you recommend I do for advertising? And there have been times where I've put money into advertising and it feels like shoveling money into a bottomless pit with no result. You know, I was on the radio, I was in the newspaper, I took out ads in trade publications, you know, like just cross stitch and needlework retailer, and they're all fine, like they're all very nice institutions and I support them. But I never placed ads where I was like, wow, that made a huge difference. Ever. I don't think I ever was like, that was money well spent. It just always felt like it was just a worthless, to me. I think for some people advertising can work. But for me, it just didn't work very well. And so I don't do any advertising. I think, you know, nowadays things like Instagram and Facebook and YouTube are great ways to get your name out there and to get people interested in what you're doing. I am glad I didn't go into that career. Because like I said, it's a tough business to be in the news. And I don't think people have a lot of respect for journalists these days anyway. They have to sell ads, you know, so a lot of journalism has become very, you know, like, what was Miley Cyrus doing the other day? And I don't think that's why anybody goes into a news career where they're like, you know what, I really want to talk about the Jonas Brothers today. I think you have higher hopes for it than that. So it's probably kind of disappointing to end up doing that. Ruby, what do you think? Ruby's very sweet. She's probably our most catty cat. Like she's just a solid cat. soft-spoken, beautiful. She's dense like a dying sun. I don't know if you've ever had a pet like that or a child where it's just like so heavy for her size. She just weighs you down. She's not fat. She's just dense. Aren't you, Ruby? But she's very nice. She's very motherly. She likes to clean the other cats and... Aren't you, Ruby? You're nice. I'm making the word and. I like stitching letters. I know it's for some people they think like, oh, I don't like stitching letters. It's boring. It's pretty easy, and it feels like you make progress really quickly. So I think in that way it can be really fun because you're really covering a lot of ground. There's a lot of white space in between, you know, like what you're stitching. I like filling. I like big areas of color. I would say I don't like confetti stitching. You know, I've done Teresa Wentzler's and pieces like that where you're jumping around with tons of color changes. And that's not my favorite way to stitch. Just because you're spending a lot of time just threading and, putting away thread and pulling out new thread, and you don't make progress very quickly. It takes a long time to get to where you see something. You know, I can sit and talk to you for 5 minutes and I've made a whole word. And so you feel like you're making good progress. They're beautiful when they're done, the confetti stitched pieces. Like, what are those? You know. The Hades, Heaven and Earth Designs. For a while, Jen and I were like, oh, we totally need to do a Hands Across the Sea piece. No, wait a minute. Heaven and Earth Designs. Heaven and Earth Designs. We're kind of enamored with the idea because you see people working on them. Like Ginger Gerald has that King Louis the Eighth. King Henry the Eighth. Not King Louis. King Henry the Eighth. That is like the famous painting of him by Hans Holbein. And it's amazing. It's super amazing. And so we were like, oh, we need to do one. But honestly, I know that if I started one of those pieces that I would start it and work on it for a little bit and then be like, there's no way I'll ever finish this. Maybe someday. And it's not even like you can say like, oh, there's, this one is small. A lot of them they're just so big. But I love that King Henry one. It's really, really cool. I'd love to do like a Van Gogh or something too. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Sorry, I gotta count. I gotta make a letter T. I need to start like putting my name on my pieces again. There's been talk about that recently on FlossTube. Do you put your name on or don't you put your name on? I used to always put my name or my initials and then the year, which now it's kind of fun to see when I did it. But I think somebody on FlossTube was this week talking about how she feels like it takes away from the design to have that little name in there. I kind of agree in a way. I don't like to add it because I feel like it's weird. Unless it's, if it's a sampler and there is a name stitched on it to stitch your own name, to me it looks good. But I guess I don't like how it looks with that little extra bit of whatever in there. I suppose you could do it real subtly. Like there's space on this piece. Is there space? Not really. I'm just thinking like, could I go in here and like stitch my initials over one and put the year over one somewhere else? That might be cool. And then at least it would be on there. I know you can stitch your name in the border, but then you frame it and it's not like you can see it. So the only people who would care would be if, in 100 years somebody buys it at a flea market. I don't know. Who knows what's going to happen to all this stuff that we spend all this time on. I like to think that they will all end up in, the hands of people who might enjoy them. And if they don't, I mean, they serve their purpose. They keep us happy and busy and artistic. I've been in the mood for meatloaf. I think it's because it's getting to be fall. I don't make meatloaf often, probably like once a year. It's such good comfort food. I thought about making it today, but I don't have any beef, so. And I don't really feel like going out. I try to do my running around town in a way that is fuel efficient. You know, when gas got really expensive in whatever year that was, it really forced me to go like, okay, here are the things I need to get done this week. And I would compile them, so it's like, okay, I'm going to do all of it in a day and then not use my car, that often. And it got to be a big enough habit that I really have just stuck with it, where I try to do, I don't like to go into town to do just one thing. And Steve always laughs because he's like, you make it sound like we're in the country. We're really not. I mean, it's like 10 or 11 minutes for me to get to, kind of the area of town that like Target and the mall and the post office and things like that. It's not that big of a drive. It just feels like going into town because I pass a lot of trees and a couple lakes. And so it kind of feels like you're making a trip into town. Hattiesburg is a really, I got to go down. Hattiesburg is a really funny community because people live here, obviously, people live here. But you can drive through places and around places, and the trees here are very thick and tall, and so you feel like you're in the forest, but in reality, you can just go look beyond those trees, and there's 1,000 houses. So, sorry, Grumpy. There's like so many people back there, but it doesn't look like there are people there. So it really does feel like driving into town, even though it's just really a short drive. But I think it's good to be careful with your resources anyway, to not, why not group your running up? My mom has always been one where she loves to bargain shop. So she will be like, I'll say, what are you doing today? And she'll say, well, I'm going to go to this place because they've got, oranges for 10 cents. And I'm going to this place so she'll do all this driving around because she saves 40 cents here. But it's like, but you use the gas and the mileage and your time to save a nickel. She enjoys it though, so she and I have very different shopping styles in ways. I used to always go grocery shopping with my mom. I was like the grocery helper, and she would give me a list, and I would run around the store and grab the things, and then she would really spend time on the things she was picking out. It makes her crazy to buy something that has a dent. Like, she just can't do it. She cannot do it. So she's one of those shoppers that she'll dig to the back of a shelf to get something, or she'll, feel things, smell things, look things over real well. And there was one time that I went to visit her when they lived in Omaha that she was like, Teresa, I need to run to the grocery store. And I was like, oh, okay, what do we need? She goes, well, I bought a can of beans and it has a dent in it. And so I was like, you're crazy. You're crazy. Well, yeah, but I just feel like if it's got a dent that you might get botulism, or I don't remember what her theory was on what a dent will do. And obviously you have to be careful, but it's crazy. I don't remember if we did it or if I talked her out of it, but that was kind of nuts. And 1, 2, 3. So she really, it took forever to grocery shop with her because she considers every item is considered and hefted about and sniffed and examined and, just she's got to, weigh the differences and figure out, is it cheaper to buy this size or that size? And I'm more of just like a grab it. Let's get this over with. Now I will say that I also don't like crushed boxes or cans at the store. And I do reach to the back. So like if I'm getting milk, I always go to the back of the case because the milk back there has a farther away expiration date. And I check my eggs and everything, but I just don't spend that much time selecting each thing. I kind of tend to buy the same things over and over again, which we're probably a lot of us are like that. But I know when I had kids and I would go to the grocery store, I mean, I would literally sometimes I would just be running and grabbing things as I ran by. Because it's just busy. It's busy to have kids. What word am I making? I don't even know. I made the letters T and H. Oh, warmth. All right. This the saying on this is kind of funny because it doesn't rhyme. I thought it was going to rhyme. I read it out on my video yesterday, I think. It's funny to me, like a lot of you, I asked if you wanted me to do Stitch With Me videos, and a lot of people said yes. And I kind of like watching them. It's nice company to have while you're doing something, just kind of on as background noise, or just to kind of feel like you're stitching with a friend. And most people were like either for it or just didn't say anything. And then there were some people that are just vehemently opposed to Stitch With Me videos. Which, I don't know. I don't know what that vehemence is about. I think they're fine generally. I watch some. Because like I said, it's just nice background for while you're doing other things. I've got so many like just little things I have to do. Like I said for the show, one of them that I have to do is the hand dyed fabrics, and and I have other fabrics too. I like to send them with a label on them, and I punch it out of scrapbook paper. And so I have punches that I punch a shape, and then I punch a little hole in it, and then I have these little rusty safety pins, and I safety pin it to the fabric. Well, I have to punch all those out, and so I made a big stack of them 2 days ago, but I'm going to make some more today. The fabric is a tricky thing to sell at the show, and I'm taking a ton of fabric, but I'm only selling it by like the quarter or half yard, and so my fabrics I do in half yard increments, but I'm getting a huge shipment from Picture This Plus tomorrow, and they sell it by the yard, which is cool, but I don't really want to just have yards sitting and then have people go, well, I want a quarter or I want a half or whatever, because I'm trying to cut down on the amount of work I have to do at the show, which means I have to prep it in advance. So for the Picture This Plus fabrics, I plan on cutting a half and then cutting the other half into 2 pieces. So I've got 2 quarters and a half. And so people can buy the quarters of the half. And if I get to the point where I'm out of the quarters and somebody only wants another quarter, I can cut that in half. But I'm not willing to cut it smaller than that at the show typically. A quarter yard to me is a real practical size to buy. And I know there are shops that do custom cuts on hand-dyed fabrics, but there's so much waste. It ends up, as a shop, you just don't, it's hard to make back, what you need on a piece of fabric to make it worth your while, because you end up with all these scraps that you can't sell because they're too small, they're too skinny. I went to a fabric store yesterday and bought some fabric, and I was talking to her about, just buying fabric, and so we got to talking about like people buying weird amounts of fabric, and she said, oh my gosh, there was that pocket craze a few years ago. And I said, what was that? And she said, oh, people got into like where they were making pockets, like they would get a t-shirt and then make like a little pocket on their t-shirt with a fun fabric. And she said people would come in and they're like, can I buy a 5x5 square of this? And it's like, no, you cannot. But they would sell a 16th of a yard. And she said it just was nuts because it takes just as long to cut a 16th of a yard as it does to cut a half of a yard or 2 yards. But the amount of money on a 16th of a yard is just tiny, but people didn't want more than that. But she said that's gone away. That there's whatever that phase was. I missed it. I guess I missed it entirely. But there was a time, I don't know if you guys remember, like back in the, I'm going to say late 80s and then early to mid 90s, where people kind of got into cross-stitched vests. Do you remember like the cross-stitched vests? Or else like applique or quilted vests? I wonder where all those ended up. They were kind of funny. You could buy, there was a company, what was the company name? They made pillows too, that you could, like tuck pillows. But you could buy these vests that then you would like sew a pumpkin onto or whatever. It would be funny to have an ugly vest party. Like people have those ugly sweater parties. If you could find some of those cross-stitched vests from the 90s. I haven't seen one of those for a long time. If I found one at a thrift store, I would totally buy it and wear it as an ironic piece of, hey, look at this. Hey, but I'm not saying you shouldn't wear it. If you have a cross-stitch vest that you like to wear, you should wear it. It's just a funny memory. I never made one myself. I considered it though. I don't know why I didn't. I like the idea of an ugly sweater party, but I don't like the idea that companies are actually manufacturing purposeful ugly sweaters where they're actually making a sweater for the purpose of making an ugly sweater for an ugly sweater party. I like it much better when the ugly sweater is the real deal. Like somebody bought it 20 years ago thinking it was pretty. It's fun. I like it when adults have fun. We get older and it's like you think you have to be so serious, but you just really don't. It's no fun to be around people who are serious all the time. It is no fun, right, Ruby? I could take a nap in this chair. I'm telling you. I am telling you. I'm making good headway, though. I think I'll get this done in time. I'm going to run to Neblets tomorrow. We have this great little local frame shop called Neblets, and the people who work there are very, very sweet. And they recently changed ownership, and they used to have it where pretty much all their frames were in stock all the time. And so you could go in with a piece of needlework and say, okay, this is the frame I want. And they would say, okay, hang on. And they would just go and build your frame and then come out and give it to you. Because I stretched my own pieces, so they'd cut you a piece of foam core and all of that. But now they've changed to where there are a couple of frames that they've got in stock, and I think it's really just old inventory that's left. So now they order it. And I don't know if they order it, you would call it chop. If you order something chop as a frame shop, it means that you're ordering it pre-cut. So the company that you buy it from cuts it for you to the size you need. But it only takes, like, I'll go in tomorrow in the morning with these pieces. I got to find the bottom of this one so they can measure it. So I got to stitch, probably later I'll stitch all the way down so I can find where the bottom's going to be. So we know how big to make the frame. I think I just made a mistake. Whatever. No, that's got to come out. So I'll have the frame on Wednesday, which I think is very reasonable. It's very nice. And their prices are so reasonable. I don't know how they make it work. Although I think they may have a pretty good markup on their glass and their matting. A lot of times, the bulk of the money that a frame shop makes, a lot of it comes from the frame. But I had them cut a mat recently, and I was like, geez, it's kind of expensive. They have one of those computerized mat cutters, which is pretty cool. It'd be fun to play with that. They're very expensive. I think they're like $15,000 or something crazy like that. But they're perfect. They make perfect mats, and you can do all kinds of fancy cuts and things that would take a lot of time. When I worked at the Great Frame Up when I was 15, starting when I was 15. And we used to do like fancy corner cuts. I don't know if you guys remember those. Back in the 80s, you know, you'd have like a little keyhole notch in the corner of the mats. They were fun to do, but boy, I bet they look dated these days. I want to say, did I have like my P. Buckley moss piece that I showed a couple videos back? I think I had a notched corner mat on that one for a long time, and I think I eventually just changed the mat out because the mat started looking kind of like a dated color. That was a fun one to do, and that wasn't really too much confetti, just a little bit though. I'm kind of feeling like it would be fun to undertake a project more like what I would have stitched. You know, like to do one of the old patterns that I've got that I still like, just for something different. One, two, three, four. Warmth. This fabric is silk weaver fabric that I'm working on. It's really pretty. It's pecan pie, but it's not super pecan pie-ish. I've ordered it in the past and it was kind of a different color than this. This is pretty light and kind of a peachy color, which I wasn't crazy about when it came in, but I just had to reframe. I had to reframe this color in my mind and say, you know what, this will work great for such and such pieces. And I think a lot of times Brenda's pieces have a real peachy, you know, hue to them. I think this color works really well with her pieces in general, and so I have a lot of this fabric left, and I think I will definitely use it for some other pieces of hers. I used it for Kathy Barrick's Miss Elizabeth Perkins too, and it looks really nice. I'm all about 40 count these days. 32 used to kind of be my go-to. I love the way things look on 40 count though, and it's you use one strand, and so it lays really nice because I don't do railroading or anything like that. I don't have a laying tool, and I don't work in a frame or a hoop. So to me, 40 count just it ends up working really well. But it just means I have to have stronger glasses so I can see it. I haven't tried stitching on the 46 count fabrics yet because I'm just not sure about it. They dye up so prettily. I've dyed a bunch of 46 count fabric and sold a bunch of it, and I love the way it looks, but I feel like I would need one more bump in my magnification. I just can't quite. I can see the threads, but it's like my eyes can't stay put in the right place long enough to just, you know, kind of lock it in. But it sure is pretty, and oh my gosh. Some of these fabrics that the girls used to use, you know, in the 1800s to stitch on were so fine. I wonder what their needles were like. They would have had to have been pretty tiny and thin. Everything looks better small. Not everything looks better small. That's a weird statement. Needlework often looks really nice when it's stitched finely. It just looks so delicate and pretty. I remember at the cross stitchery, I don't know if you guys are going to remember these, but there were Ruth Sparrow had these charts called Tall Guys, and they were like three guys, and they were seasonal. And I want to say that they had done one on like 7 count Clostern with maybe like all 6 strands of DMC floss. And so they were tall stand-ups, and they were really kind of cool. There was a lot of that kind of fabric back then where people were stitching on like 10 count Heatherfield and 10 count Tula and 7 count Clostern. And it was kind of the look for a while. And I think I have a little bit of, I have some black Tula. I don't even know if they make Tula anymore. It's just not in vogue right now. It's not to say it won't come back. I mean, you can obviously get 11 count Aida, and you could hand dye it or not hand dye it. Heatherfield was a kind of a fuzzy, it was an acrylic, and it kind of had a really kind of sweatery look to it where it had kind of flecks that ran through it, and it was really popular. It came in 10 count Heatherfield, 16 count, and 22 count. And it was built more like an Aida, but it was really soft, so it could kind of be tricky to work on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then it just stopped being popular. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I don't know what it was. I don't know why all of a sudden. Lizzie Kate used to use it often. I want to say Fancy That did. Kind of been in the mood to start a Fancy That piece. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Fancy That. She really, I mean, like, she latched on to hand-dyed threads, hand-dyed fabrics, and Jabco buttons way back when all that stuff was, like, new. And some of her designs are still so cute. I have this really primitive one that is ghosts. I'm gonna put a picture of it somewhere here, somewhere up in the ether, so you can see it. And I think it's so cute. Still, I bought this chart on eBay because I have some of her witch charts, which are really cute, and then she did a bunch of angels that are also very cute. But I knew this lady. She used to come into the frame shop, and she stitched a ton of Fancy That pieces, and they were always so cute. Stitching the word of. It would stink to, I'm not super paying attention to my needlework because I'm trying to talk to you guys too, but I just feel like I'm going to not forget what word I'm stitching, and just look at the wrong O and then put the wrong letter next to it. And you can't work that in. You can't. That is a ripper-outer. But anyway, she used to frame all of these Fancy That pieces, and they were just darling. And she just had such a great folk arty kind of style that I think we would find very appealing today. And you know what? If you are interested in Fancy That, totally take a look on eBay or Etsy, because a lot of times you can buy her old patterns for a couple dollars. And they use a lot of sampler threads, a lot of weeks. She used a lot of Green Mountain linens too. And Anna from Green Mountain Linens died about 15 years ago maybe, and she was so nice. She raised show cats. 2, 3, 4. She had kind of she was so nice, and she was so talented. Her fabrics were so cool and grungy. And she had terrible cancer, and she beat it for a while, and then it came back, and it just like was, it just took her down real quick. I want to say it was like liver cancer or something terrible like that. But she was one of those where she went to a show with her hand-dyed fabrics that were so cool and grungy. And like you and I and friends used to sell them in their shop. And gosh, I thought they were cool. But so she went to a show and sold a ton of fabric. And she got really popular really quickly. And she was trying to keep up with demand. And then she had all this trouble because that's kind of when internet shops started to be a new thing. And so there were all these people that were creating business accounts saying that they had online stores, and they didn't actually have an online store. They just wanted to get accounts so they could buy stuff at wholesale for themselves and their friends. And they would do things like, set up a 30-day account and then just disappear, with a couple $1,000s worth of fabric. And she could never track them down to collect, and so then she had a tough time, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, just making ends meet and trying to recover after that. There was, I remember when the whole Nigerian, you would get phone calls. I would get emails sometimes from people abroad where they're like, I want to buy, I just remember this one time, it was a crazy story where it was a guy who was like, I would like to buy you know, it was like 10 yards of this and 10 yards of that and 100 of these. And he just like went through my website and picked out various things. And I was like, what are you doing with all this stuff? And he was like, well, there's a wedding and we're something about gifts. And I was like, I don't know about that. So I said, I would like to pre-charge you for this before I order all this stuff in, because I don't want to be stuck with all this inventory. And the card came up as stolen. And then I said, I'm done working with you because this card is coming up as stolen. And he was like, why will you not help me out? It is not Christian of you not to help me. And I was like, it's not Christian to steal somebody's credit card number. But the gals at the cross stitchery unfortunately got taken on that one, where they were able to run the card. They ordered the merchandise, sent it all off, and then found out later that it was a stolen number. And, you know, I think people they're like, oh, you know, it's never a problem if my card, you know, gets charged fraudulently, my bank will just, you know, put money back in my account. Well, that happens at the expense of the retailer that took the card. The bank doesn't. 2, 3, 4. The bank doesn't pay, the business does. And so if I take a stolen card number and, you know, charge a bunch of things to it, and then it comes across that, oh no, this card was used fraudulently, as a store, it's my fault that I didn't, you know, check an ID or whatever to make sure that the card belonged to the person who said it belonged to them. So then as a store, you have to pay that back. They basically just take it out of your account. And I've never had that happen to me, fortunately, but I know poor Judy, I mean, it was like a $1,500 order, I want to say. And they had already shipped the stuff out and could not get it back. There was another time that somebody contacted me and they wanted to place a big order, but also they wanted me to go buy them cell phones. And he offered me like an extra $150. And I was like, no. So I don't know. I mean, that was obviously fraudulent too. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I skipped down a row. Now I'm making the word my. I'm going to start wrapping this up though. I think I've been blabbing long enough. Somebody last week was like, wow, you can sure just talk for a long time. I'm like, yep, my husband is a good listener. Which is nice. So I'll show you where I'm at. I made some pretty good progress. I finished this line and I did this line here. So really all I've got left is that line and then this bottom part, which will go pretty quick. The sunflowers are pretty easy to do because once I get that first stitch placed, they're just the same motif over and over again. And then the little diamonds at the bottom, and then it'll be done. But if I can get to the bottom, then when I take it to the frame store, they can measure from the top to the bottom and know how big they need to make the frame. I thought about doing a Priscilla and Chelsea finish on this one. I think it would be cute mounted. I'm sorry. Okay. Ow. I think it would be cute mounted like on a board or something. But I'm probably just going to put it in a frame. Probably. I don't know. Yeah, that's probably what I'm going to do. Because like I said, Nebulous is very reasonable. And I do my own stretching and everything. And I have my own tools for closing. So I really just end up buying a frame. I suppose I could go look at like Hobby Lobby or Michael's. Or, and you know, because a lot of times they have their frames on sale. But really what they've done is just mark them up a bunch of times so they can sell them at the cheaper price. But I think this is really, really pretty. And it's fallish, and I'm in the mood for fall. Like I said, meatloaf. I should work meatloaf in on the sampler. I think the people are really cute. And my back is fuzzy, as always, but it won't show. Okay, guys. I gotta get to work. It was nice spending time with you, but that's been long enough, I feel. If you feel like you could have listened to me longer, replay it and listen to me again, right? I hope you guys have a great rest of the weekend or a good week. I hope that you had fun working on what you're working on and that you have some nice projects lined up for fall, because I think fall is a great time to stitch, isn't it, Grumpy? isn't it? Well, we will see you guys next time. Bye-bye.